And now to that dire warning from top airline executives over a potential aviation, quote, catastrophe. That's what they're calling it when AT&T and Verizon roll out their new 5G service, wireless service tomorrow. They say it could ground some larger aircraft and strand tens of thousands of Americans overseas unless changes are made. That's what the airlines are arguing. CEOs say starting tomorrow, a slew of flights are going to be canceled in the United States, including those carrying vaccines. But now looks like there might be some light at the end of the tunnel, some way out of this. And so for more, let's bring in our transportation correspondent, Gio Benitez, with the latest. So, Gio, we're learning that both AT&T and Verizon have agreed to something. What's going on now?
Yeah, Terry, there's a bit of breaking news now because it looks like crisis has been averted, at least for the major cancellations and disruptions that we were looking at, because AT&T and Verizon say that they're actually going to put these buffer zones in place. They're not going to activate towers that are closest to some of the major airports. So that's good news in terms of whether this is going to affect the airplanes. But basically, Terry, what was happening here is they didn't quite know. The airlines, the FAA, they didn't quite know whether 5G would affect what's called the radio altimeter on a plane. That basically tells pilots how far they are from the ground. And that's why it's so important, because they need that when they're landing, especially in rough weather. Without that, they would have to reroute. And that's why the airlines were saying we were going to have to cancel all of these flights.
Yeah, that does sound kind of important, Gio. Just pilots should know just how far they are from the ground. But seriously, what is the issue with 5G? And we hear that it's all over the world, that European airlines fly with it. What's the sticking point here without getting too technical?
Yeah, so listen, so the FAA, they actually say, yeah, other countries do in fact have this in place and there hasn't been an issue, but that's in part because there are permanent buffer zones around these airports. So it's permanently blocked within a certain radius around these airports. And we're seeing there that statement from the FAA. They say they continue to work with the aviation industry and wireless companies to try to limit 5G related flight delays and cancellations. And that is what they're doing. But around the world, when you look at this, what we're also seeing is that in the US, in America, this signal, this 5G signal, this stronger 5G signal would be 2.5 times stronger than what we're seeing around the world. So the airlines are basically saying, listen, we don't want to test this with planes in the air full of passengers. And that's why they just want to hit the brakes on this just for a little bit. But the wireless companies, they've been saying, you know, you've had 2 years to look at this, but no doubt they are still delaying their 5G rollout.
And so, Joe, we have heard, as you were just reporting, this breaking news that there is some timeout essentially being called right now. But we're also hearing, I guess, some airlines have already canceled flights, citing 5G concerns.
Yeah, some airlines started to do that in advance, especially around the world. A lot of airlines around the world were looking at this, especially with those larger planes. Those larger planes were a very big issue. But it may just be because the news hasn't gotten to them just yet. So that's one of the things they're looking at. But if they're looking at these major airports, so think the New York area airport, the DC area airport, those right now are probably going to be protected for a bit until they figure out, and the FAA and the airlines and the wireless companies, until they come to an agreement about what should be done in the future.
And so the airlines, I guess, have asked the federal government to step in here. Is there a role for the White House? Is there leadership that needs to happen from here in Washington?
Well, a lot of people say that this is the FAA. The FAA needs to make a decision about what they do, because what the airlines were asking for were basically, you know, the wireless companies, they did not want them to have this 5G signal within 2 miles of an airport. They said, you know, once we figure out if this is safe, we can go ahead and shorten that radius. We can make it smaller. But right now we want to start at 2 miles. That way, if there's any issue at all, we're protected and we're able to land these planes safely. That's what the airlines were asking for, and they were asking the federal government to step in. It turns out that the wireless companies are the ones who said, you know what, we're just going to voluntarily pause this right now. We're going to delay this at some of these major airports. And that was an unexpected move. But no doubt about it, we know President Biden has already addressed this now. The White House is looking at this, and they're trying to come up with a solution about moving forward.
That sounds like the right thing to do for sure. Now, I guess airline CEOs have said this 5G rollout could even affect the already struggling supply chain. That's just what we want to hear. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely, because we're not just talking about passenger flights. We're talking about cargo flights, including cargo flights with medical supplies. So we're talking about vaccine distribution as well. That is a very, very real concern. The White House addressed that today, saying that it is indeed a real concern. So it's not just passenger flights. Obviously, passengers are going to be frustrated if their flights are canceled or they're rerouted to another airport because planes can't land where they were originally going. But when we're looking at cargo flights, the airlines have said this would actually halt a lot of our cargo systems.
And finally, Gio, what should people who are planning to fly this week do? My wife is planning to fly to Kansas City this weekend for the NFL playoff game. I'm not coming with her because I'm a Bears fan, so she's taking our son. But should she be concerned? Should people who are planning to fly be concerned?
Look, if this were just a few hours ago, Terry, I would have said absolutely. Right now, it looks like the major disruptions. There's still going to be some problems, right? We're still going to see some cancellations and delays, so you might want to expect that. But overall, especially if you're flying into major airports, most of these problems have been avoided. And so that's the good news right now. So if you're flying this week and this weekend, you might be okay. But if you see a problem, that is something that we're still looking at because some airports still will have this 5G nearby and they're not going to turn on that device that they need to land. And so depending on the weather, if the weather is clear, you're probably okay.
All right. Well, that is very helpful. Gio Benitez, as always, thanks very much.